All right, we are live. This is Sound Booth Theater Live, and today is part 2 of the cold reads of Everybody Loves Large Chests, Volume 11, Tol-Saroth. Welcome back, everybody. Thanks for coming. Really appreciate your attendance. Hope I can be entertaining for you today. I have been doing VR boxing in the morning. Actually, no, I did it yesterday morning. I didn't do it this morning because I'm too sore. Dude, I'm fucking, it just, getting old sucks, that's all. Plus, I just haven't been that active, you know? But my shoulders are all tight, achy. Maybe I need to stretch more in the morning before I start with the actual boxing. But thrill of the fight too. Any of you guys VR people, I highly recommend that one. That's multiplayer boxing, VR boxing. Yeah, you missed the first one. Sorry, Rick. Ooh, stroke at 42. I'm gonna cross my fingers and hope that doesn't happen to me. Yep. It sucks. But what are you gonna do? Nothing. Just keep recording audiobooks. That's all any of us can do. All right, let's see. I need to check something real quick. See if Okay, good. All right, so time to open up the last set of Tol-Saroth. There we go. What's up, Roho 77077? Just popping into Davey. Really hope you finish all current series on Amazon and take any new ones to your app. Just been listening to part 1 at work. Stopping in to say I'll use my credit on Audible and buy the copy on the app to support Sound Booth and the author. Wow, you guys are awesome. Thank you, Ghost Pyra. I fought off growing up. Aging is a different beast. Yeah. It's Boxxy time. Thank you, Sound Booth Theater Live, for acknowledging that. Okay. Rojo says, hope all current series finish on Audible. Okay, so yeah, Rojo, maybe you're saying that because I had mentioned possibly bringing ELLC volumes 11 and or 12 and or 13 to the app instead of to Audible. I think maybe someone had suggested we put it on the app first for an exclusive amount of time, like 3 to 6 months or something, and then re-release on Audible. I wish there was a record. I wish I could look at a record of exactly how high we went for Volume 10, like ranking-wise. Ghost Pyre says, I'd be willing to double dip on the other books if there is physical copies I can buy. So that's actually an interesting point. Physical copies. You guys do know about the books on tape that we do. And then, we have the Dungeon Crawler Carl audio immersion tunnel on there. We have a bunch of different cinematics on our books on tape. But if we took it non-exclusive from Audible, starting from book 1, and that's something we are considering, the idea here is we would say, okay, maybe let's volume 11, we go straight to Audible. But then For volume 12, we go straight to Sound Booth, and we simultaneously go non-exclusive on Audible and release the entire series on Sound Booth. If we did that, then we would do our books on tape. Oh, Logan Ross, you have not seen our books on tape. Let me do some presenting here. See, I'll bring a Chrome tab over to this other monitor. Okay. Window, here it is. All right, so I'll go ahead and do this. So this is our merch shop, merch.soundbooththeater.com. As you can see, you can get our classic t-shirt. You can get our narration socks. And these are scientifically engineered to make you better at narration. As you can see, there are these stat boosts for the narration socks. The silent step +1, toe temperature +5. That's pretty intense. Silly accents +1, pretty good. Arch support +0.2. You know, socks really can't help that much with arch support. Balance +1. Heel pain -1. That's a really nice one. And biggest stat in my opinion, I mean, the narration +1 is nice, but Lego defense +2. So the narration socks are definitely a good stat boost. I highly recommend those. $20 for those. But we also have our books on tape. So this is the Dungeon Crawler Carl Audio Immersion Tunnel. Now this particular printing is now out of print. We have a few more that we're going to be taking to DragonCon this year. JordanCon this year, which will be not this weekend, but next weekend. That's in Atlanta. We have 35 more copies left, and they will be gone after JordanCon. We are sold out of the web version. But yeah, these are the books on tape. They are actually USBs cosplaying as cassettes, but you still get the cool jacket. Here's the inside. Really love these things. And this is available for a lot of our productions, so go ahead and shop the merch store and find these. But we are putting in a new order for another run. Another print run of the Dungeon Crawler Carl Audio Immersion Tunnel. The second edition will have a completely different cover. So all of you who've already picked up the original DCC Audio Immersion Tunnel book on tape, you are one of the lucky 1,000 people to get that first edition. Yeah, so if you guys really want to support us and, you know, you want to have a souvenir, and some of you have been a little upset that you aren't able to download the MP3s of the audiobooks from the app or from our from our website when you purchase them. If you get the physical, if you get the cassette, they're just MP3s on a USB. You can drag them right off of the USB onto your computer. So you have the MP3s in their original form no matter what. And you can do whatever you want with them. Bill, I don't know. I don't think we can. That's our last of the first editions, man. We gotta have something special for those JordanCon goers. Sorry about that, Bill. But we will have the second edition at Lit RPG Con. And we'll have lots of DCC stuff that you guys are gonna go nuts for at the Lit RPG Con. So don't you worry. But yeah, plenty of good stuff on tape already. Kaiju is also sold out, unfortunately. Kaiju Battlefield Surgeon. We are working on a second printing of that. Our first printing of this one was 200 copies. Our next printing is going to be 500 copies. Again, it's going to be a different cover. So all of you who got this cover, that is a first edition. There's only 200 of them, and so you are special, important people if you got those. Yeah, narration sucks. There is a small Chesterfind 2 cassette. We just haven't put it on the merch store yet. I think it's time to do that very soon. Oh, hey, you have you also have some scaffed art as your profile. That's awesome. So, yeah, go to merch.soundbooththeater.com if you want any of this stuff. You can order it now. All right. So let's get on to some narration. And we are starting on 1.1. I did find the converted version. So I was talking about, let's see, where to go? Manuscripts, Tol-Saroth. Open in-app. Here we go. Fizzy's rear bumper. Okay, Bunny Girl Evolution, Wrinkle and Crime. Where is it? Is this it? Here we go. Hey, thanks, Sir Randy Marsh. All right, so... Hey, where's all the character names? All right, well, just gonna have to be copy-pasting as we go. So, Galen. Let's give this one to Gary. Galen is... old... let's see, old, slightly, what's the word? Skittish. Wizard. English. Elf. So, posh English. All right. Let's go ahead and put the tags here to Gary. All right, then we have... Okay, sorry, I need to do a new... No, that's slides and PDFs. Stop screen, there we go. Share screen, window, here, okay. And we'll go this way, there we go. All right, I'm just leaving, I'm leaving instructions for the other actors. So, Irvon. Okay. There we go. All right, those are taken care of. What I'm doing right now is just marking up the script so that I make sure that all the right actors are getting assigned. Thanks for letting us know how much Audible takes off the top. My partner and I are going to buy of your books we don't have going forward directly from you guys. Love the work you all do. Thank you, Chase. Going to have to see if I can order some stuff to the hotel when we're in Florida next month. All right. Flipster, are you across the pond? Is that why you're waiting till you're in Florida? What are you doing in Florida, by the way? Or are you a Canadian or something? Oh, I forgot to do something. Yeah, I'll deal with it later. Okay, let's see here. All right. Aylmer, that's going to be me. And I need to read. So I was informed by Neven that Aylmer is actually a character that I need to redo his voice. Birthday at Disney. Yes, crimes. That is what Florida is for. It's for committing crimes. That's why it's awesome. Okay. All right, so there's a particular character. Here he is. I need to listen to him. Let me go ahead and refresh here. 1409. Here it is. Okay, I got it. Let's redo his lines now. Hey! Evron! Hey! Hey! Evron! Tree gazing again, I see. How'd your meeting with the Guildmaster? How'd your meeting with the Guildmaster go? So, no extra funding? Really? Well, congratulations. Really? Well, congratulations. Ah. Terrible. The trail went cold somewhere in the sewer. Ah. Do I still reek? I was certain my newest formula got rid of the filth. One more time. Do I still reek? Yeah. I was certain my newest formula got rid of the filth. Hey, it's not like I got anything... Hey. Hey, it's not like I got anything better to do when I'm just an initiate. Hey, it's not like I got anything better to do when I'm just an initiate. Please, Ifron. We both know you're hopeless when it comes to alchemy. There. There, at least you have no equal. Tell me, what wondrous fantasy were you envisioning earlier? It'd be difficult not to. That would be quite the sight indeed. Reckon you can make it happen. Alright, cool. Got that one out the way. What's this one? Okay, let's get rid of these muse. Extra muse. Okay, and I think we're good. Alright, fixed. Alright. In the words of Donut OMG, it's Jeff Hayes. Crazy. You rock, man. Thank you for all your hard work. Thank you, Frank DeShane. Good to see you. Malora says, were you just waiting for the series to end? I thought for sure you had forgotten about this series. No, I did not forget. It's just, excuse me. It's just, this series is a whole lot of work because we do tons of music and sound effects, and it's just, it's a lot. So, also I've had a lot of shit going on lately, and yeah, it's just been delayed is all, and I'm so happy to get back to it. So I'm glad you guys are here to witness this rejuvenation of the series. Later, Flibster. All right, let's move on to part 2. Oh, might as well kitten. I will be kitten. Okay. Did I assign casually dressed lady to... Nope, I just kept it. So we'll just say that's me. Paste. Nope. Yeah, good. Okay. Cora is me. This is Kira. And also Cecilia. Boxxy is obviously me. Alejandra is Lavender. Alright. Madeline, Lydia, and Robin are all Becca. Okay. Becca Sands. Do we have an R? No, we don't. Okay, I'm going to ask. What color did I make her in this? All right. So that one will need, I'll have to come back to that. Sandman is me, of course. Fizzy is Dory. Yay, Dory. All right. Ready to go. Why am I getting bleep bloops? Let's kill the damn bleep bloops. All right. Wow. Okay, my OCD is getting angry because I have not seen volumes 1 through 10, but again, thank you for your work. Can't wait for the Inevitable Ruin. Inevitable Ruin is out there, if you haven't listened already. Malore, fair enough. Looking forward to this shiny addition to my Audible collection. Sir Randy Marsh says, curious if DCC Immersion Tunnel Season 2 will be a thing. Do you find them worth the effort to make? Yes, Seasons 2 and 3 are coming out this year. So what happens when a release happens but the narration has the wrong voice? When a release happens but the narration has the wrong voice? I don't know what you mean. Frank Deshane says, I'll catch up with the rest after I listen to Kaiju. Because I just found it on your channel. You mean you found the streaming version, the YouTube version of Kaiju Battlefield Surgeon? Yeah, like in the last Boxxy book. What? What are we talking about here? Like, who was doing the narration if it wasn't me? You're not talking about narration, you're talking about a character's voice, I suppose. Tristan, can you email support@soundbooththeater.com and let them know? For Reggie. Oh. Reggie got missed somehow. Yeah, I don't know what chapter and part that is, so please let us know. I had no idea this was a problem. Thank you. All right. Let's get on with it. Part 2. Boxxy trudged into its home dungeon, feeling especially irate. Though the honeydew withdrawal was partially to blame, the root cause of its sour mood was Stain. More specifically, the weird memories she put into Doris and Rowanna's heads. While the mother-daughter pair seemed fine, they were convinced they hadn't done anything besides play 3 Dragon Downs and sleep for 2 weeks straight. No eating, no drinking, no bathroom breaks, just cards and naps. If Stain was going to do something like this again, she'd need to put a lot more effort into the fabricated visions to meet Boxxy's rigorous standards. Admittedly, she did implant a subconscious suggestion that prevented the Slithes from questioning their recollections, but that would fall apart the instant someone else probed them about the stay. So, the shapeshifter had Snacks spice up their implanted memories to make them more believable. The Djinn naturally complained about getting so much finicky brain work lately and was subsequent. This line is funny. The Djinn naturally complained about getting so much finicky brain work lately and was subsequently silenced when Boxxy shoved an extra meaty tentacle down her throat. Meanwhile, the triplets were handed off to their respective tutors for individual training. Robin was entrusted to Yoshin Amidori, a dog-eared beastkin and self-described samurai. Robin was entrusted to Yoshin Amidori. Robin was entrusted to Yoshin Amidori, a dog-eared beastkin and self-described samurai, whatever that was. On paper, he was a level 84 warrior with a focus on two-handed swords. His fighting style was powerful and careful, relying on his ability to outthink his opponent and anticipate their next move to land a devastating counter. It seemed a good fit for Robin. Who had inherited a lot of Korra's strengths and weaknesses. She had to learn patience and precision if she was to make the most of her innately powerful frame. The former fiend learned the same lessons after her first bout against Jen, though her daughter was far less pig-headed and would likely catch on quicker. Yoshin was also a level 60 monster tamer that rode fearsome beasts into battle. Robin had previously expressed a fondness and respect for the Empire's mounted cavalry, so the samurais... Robin had previously expressed a fondness and respect for the Empire's mounted cavalry, so the samurai's skill set seemed a good fit to keep her engaged and, more importantly, busy. Lydia, on the other hand, was sent to explore the wilderness surrounding Azure Vale with Damon Greymane. Is this a new character? Okay, new character. Damon Greymane. Lydia, on the other hand, was sent to explore the wilderness surrounding Azure Vale with Damon Greymane. The guy was an oddball, a human hailing from the kingdom without a trace of small folk blood in him. He was also one of Lunar's monks, providing him access to a few magic-related skills. His secondary job was Ranger, with a focus on thrown weapons, including diversionary tools like noisemakers and smoke bombs. While an odd combination, it made him versatile since he had decent range. His secondary job was Ranger, with a focus on thrown weapons, including diversionary tools like noisemakers and smoke bombs. While an odd combination, it made him versatile since he had decent ranged options to cover for the monk's melee-centric skills. His personality was a bit troublesome, though. Damon was a wanderer that seemed physically incapable of staying in one place too long, so it was quite fortunate he happened to be passing through Azure Vale when Kira needed him. He seemed like the perfect guy to show Lydia how to make practical use of all that theoretical knowledge she soaked up from books and lectures. Plus, she desperately needed to learn to identify a lost cause as such and give up on it while she still could. Her tutor would help with this since he was a coward that ran from most of his problems. This wasn't necessarily a bad trait for an adventurer, and it had certainly kept this guy alive long enough to acquire a vast wealth of sagely wisdom, not to mention a total job level of 150. It was much more difficult finding someone to school Maddie. While the girl was adamant about not being a burden to her loved ones, she was absolutely useless in a fight. This wasn't just Boxxy's opinion, but an official collective assessment of the Central Consortium's 8 guilds. Madeline took every adventurer aptitude test they had and scored poorly on all of them. It was almost as if she was destined to be little more than eye candy, though the crafty shapeshifter was quick to convince her that wasn't necessarily a bad thing. Unless the girls planned to do nothing but mercenary guild work, they'd have to interact with all kinds of people, and having a social butterfly on the team could help in ways that might and magic could not. The middle sibling had displayed an innate gift for understanding others, and if she leveraged her looks and outgoing personality, her powers of persuasion would be formidable. Boxxy would know, considering it did basically the same thing as Kira. Incidentally, that chat also caused a certain intrusive thought to resurface, the notion that Madeline somehow inherited a few of the shapeshifter's traits. Disturbing implications aside, the most annoying of the blondes was handed over to an equally infuriating fellow named Sareb Abedin. Or Carib. Disturbing implications aside, the most annoying of the blondes was handed over to an equally infuriating fellow named Sareb Abedin. He was an elf native to Azurevale. And one of the few bards that was also a full-time adventurer. There were arguably better wordsmiths among Kira's acquaintances, but he had something the others did not. Knowledge of an obscure technique called the Arcane Song. In essence, it was a way to invoke spells through rhythm and melody. This technique was slower, costlier, and more flexible than the standard method of invocation through chants and mental imagery. More importantly, it allowed people with zero magical aptitude, such as Maddie, to cast spells with significantly reduced risk of failure or backfire so long as they had a bard's empowered vocal skill. Maddie already had that requirement covered, meaning she only had to pick up the wizard job and learn the arcane song from Mr. Abedin. Disturbing implications aside, the most annoying of the blondes was handed over to an equally infuriating fellow named... Disturbing implications aside, the most annoying of the blondes was handed over to an equally... Disturbing implications aside, the most annoying of the blondes was handed over... Disturbing implications aside, the most annoying of the blondes was handed over to an equally infuriating fellow named Sareb Abedin. There we go. That way she could support her sisters both in and out of battle. Though she obviously wouldn't be as prolific in combat as either of them. All in all, considering the short notice involved, Boxxy thought it did a pretty good job finding private tutors for each sibling. This drastically lowered its workload, as did the small army of clandestine FIB agents that would help ensure their safety. The Bureau was quite eager to help Kira's students since they wanted to repay the redhead for unraveling the mystery of the Great Collapse. The triplets would also likely not struggle with their new duties thanks to all those divine blessings the Pantheon heaped on them, especially Lunar's boon, which drastically increased the rate at which they picked up practical skills and retained information. If properly motivated, which they certainly were, the girls could learn in a week what would normally take half a year. Kira made sure to warn her colleagues the blondes were unnaturally fast learners and advised them to come up with the most intense crash courses they could conjure. The essence concealment skill was the last and arguably most vital piece that made the delegation possible. This was Jujubee's gift to the first Nephilim and made it much simpler for the girls to go through official channels with far fewer questions. Rather than oust them as strangely well-developed 2-year-olds of an unknown race, the repeated appraisals would only identify them as human girls in their late teens. Their horns and blazing green eyes would be explained away with an unfortunate, unspecified, and fabricated childhood incident that involved a powerful demon. Oops. Speaking of divine influence, Teresa disliked that her daughters had to lie about their origins, but understood the necessity. The world wasn't ready to have a new race of half-demon, half-divine enlightened appear out of nowhere. While there would likely never be a good time for such a ridiculous revelation, it was probably for the best if it happened after the Nephilim had achieved a stable population, or, at the very least, learned to fend for themselves. Until then, they would have to be cared for and protected, and Boxxy made sure to put in the minimal amount of effort in that regard. That was where its familiars came in. Arms watched over and supervised Robin's night training. Claws shadowed Lydia on her... Arms watched over and supervised Robin's night training. Claws shadowed Lydia on her out-of-town excursion, and Zira ensured Maddie's loose lips didn't sink any ships. While workable, these arrangements were far from ideal. Fizzy was a better fit for Robin's bodyguard, since Arm's very existence attracted the wrong kind of attention. She also knew a thing or two about putting Lydia's theory into practice, and radiated so much confidence... Damn it. She also knew a thing or two about putting Lydia's theory into practice, and radiated so much confidence she made Maddie look like a wallflower. Plus, she was a talented mentor with a knack for teaching. The radiant construct could very well mentor any of the sisters, but she had her hands full taking care of someone far more important. Namely, a miserable pile of lies called Boxxy T. Morningwood.
Come on, then. Let's get busy.
The golem demanded.
My herpes isn't going to test itself.
Yeah. The shapeshifter grumbled. The two monsters walked over to the dungeon core platform, the brightest part of the cavernous tree trunk. Boxxy sat cross-legged on the floor, its back to Fizzy. The metallic artificer proceeded to stick a series of 6 mithril clamps into the gray flesh covering its spinal column. She linked them together with some wiring that fed into a small half-collar attached to the base of the doppelganger's skull. She then flipped a tiny switch, causing Boxxy to shudder reflexively as the machinery sprang to life.
All right, all set on my end. Let's start the first trial.
The shapeshifter groaned affirmatively while the golem walked around to face it with a sealed vial of honeydew in her grasp. Its hand twitched as if it was about to grab for it, but Fizzy's arm cannon was pointed at its head before it could even make the attempt. Keeping a vigilant eye on the greedy monster's spotty impulse control was the main reason she had refused to help train the girls. No mortal knew this creeper better than her. No mortal knew this creeper better than her, and she... No mortal knew this creeper better than her, and she understood that not even 24-hour supervision would be enough. That was where the honeydew exposure reactive preventative electrocution system came into play. That was where the honeydew exposure reactive preventative electrocution system came into play. The contraption was designed to deliver a minor electric shock every time the thing it was attached to. The contraption was designed to deliver a minor electric shock every time the thing it was attached to, in this case Boxxy, came into close proximity with the narcotic substance. Simply dangling a vial of the stuff in front of the monster was not enough to set it off, but it started beeping quietly once Fizzy uncorked the container and let the dog's aromas... Damn it. Simply dangling a vial of the stuff in front of the monster was not enough to set it off, but it started beeping quietly once Fizzy uncorked the container and let the drug's aroma waft over the doppelganger. The closer she brought the sample to its face, the faster it beeped. She dropped a goopy dollop on top of the monster's cranium. The herpes let out the loudest, longest beep yet, followed... The herpes let out the loudest, longest beep yet, followed immediately by a painful zap of electricity funneled straight into Boxxy's spine. The monster shrieked and shuddered in pain before collapsing, its body paralyzed by the invasive current. Fizzy walked over and checked on the controller unit on the shapeshifter's neck, noting the values on the tiny gauges she had built into it. go. Oh, to reword your question. Well, that's a pretty big one. I think we want to change that.
Okay, seems I overtuned it a bit. No, plus, that's not how that works. Null, can you please explain it to her? Because I'm busy. Yes, I know it's pointless. Just do it. Thank you.
The golem idly chatted with her alter egos as she fiddled with the delicate device. Its payload was intended to cause discomfort, not paralysis. She had underestimated just how vulnerable a doppelganger's spinal column was to its bane. This proved the testing phase was arguably the most important part of developing a new invention. Unfortunately, the golem had forgotten about the glob of honeydew on Boxxy's cranium. The herpes picked up its presence the instant it finished charging back up and went off before its creator could finish tweaking it. The repeat shock was just as powerful as the first, incapacitating the shapeshifter mere moments after it had regained control of its body. Fizzy realized her oversight and wiped the narcotic substance from its skin to prevent any more misfires. Were you trying to kill me? It complained a short while later.
Relax. The herpes monitors your vitals. It won't shock you if there's a chance it might drain the last of your HP.
That doesn't that mean I can just leave myself near death and...
You really don't want to do that.
As expected, Boxxy immediately figured out how to circumvent the device's automated disciplinary action. However, Fizzy had also thought of that.
Honeydew takes a few days to completely work itself out of your system. What do you think the herpes will do if you actually manage to swallow some?
It will keep zapping me, won't it?
Exactly. And it won't ever run out of juice since it feeds off your MP.
Boxxy had to admit, the idea of being zapped every few seconds for days on end sounded far more unpleasant than the withdrawal system. Boxxy had to admit, the idea of being zapped every few seconds for days on end sounded far more unpleasant than the withdrawal symptoms. It could, of course, just rip the thing from its body, but the rational side of its mind recognized the need for it. The herpes was there to dissuade Boxxy should it have a moment of weakness while nobody else was around to stop it. Thankfully, it would be another month or so before Ambrosia woke from her nap. It would be far more difficult to resist the temptation of the source of this. It would be far more difficult to resist the temptation if the source of its addiction started actively encouraging it. Ha. That's a funny one, Mark Reed. I think you should actually accidentally reveal yourself. I'm trying to think, what is the worst thing that she could hear from this series?
Boxxy, you're drooling.
Yes, and...
Never mind. So, what's on the agenda for tonight? You mentioned you had something important to do while the meatbags were asleep?
Right. I think it's high time our little group held a more in-depth training exercise.
What, another dungeon run?
Not exactly. Those are good for getting used to working as a group. But I noticed a certain flaw when we fought the old god.
Really? I think we did pretty good, all things considered.
I agree. But pretty good. I agree. But pretty good won't cut it on the Shattered Isles. We need to be flawless. And what I saw back there was anything but.
Boxxy was, to put it mildly, a control freak. It made sure to regularly take note of each group member's strengths, weaknesses, and abilities so it could utilize them to their fullest. However, it felt something was missing during the encounter with the old god of destruction. It spent the 2 days following that encounter reviewing and analyzing its perfect recollection of the fight, courtesy of the legendary intelligence perk. This
You just made me really want tacos, Tabrasa. Thanks a lot. Fuck tacos. I hate you. Why did you make me think of tacos?
It spent the 2 days following that encounter reviewing and analyzing its perfect recollection of the fight, courtesy of the legendary intelligence perk. This retrospective analysis allowed it to pick out a lot of small issues that it couldn't pay attention to during the battle. While the Monster Demon Coalition had certainly performed well considering this was their first real fight together, there were a lot of missed opportunities. For instance, Jen didn't give Fizzy a chance to cast Holy Infusion, which would have significantly bolstered the Griffin Harpy's attack power. Plus, the girls had frequently gotten in one another's way, like when Snack forgot that her fire spells and Claw's highly flammable webbing weren't a good mix. There were a lot of these hiccups, and their root cause was a fundamental issue.
We, as a group, lack information about one another. And by we, I mean the rest of you. None of you seem aware of any skills, jobs, perks, spells, or martial arts outside your own. You've always assumed what the others were capable of and went with the flow. It's worked so far, but relying on improvisation alone will get us nowhere if we plan to challenge the scores of veterans and VIPs attending the Dragon Festival.
Though the golem naturally disliked having her shortcomings dragged into the open, she couldn't argue with... Though the golem naturally disliked having her shortcomings dragged into the open, she couldn't argue with Boxxy's point. Fizzy was a living example of how the right combination of skills from multiple jobs could produce a result greater than the sum of its parts. However, she had never bothered to think of achieving something like that with beings other than herself and her parallels. Conversely, the people attending the Dragon Festival had worked together for decades and were already aware of which synergies worked best. Conversely, the people attending the Dragon Festival had worked together for decades and were already aware of which synergies worked best. It was safe to assume they'd practiced executing their combination techniques until it became second nature. Boxxy's group would have to be playing a lot of catch-up in relatively little time, but the endeavor would likely be quite beneficial nonetheless. Fizzy could not argue with the shapeshifter's logic. Plus, it was the perfect excuse for her to strut her stuff and assert dominance over the rest of the meatbags. Lorthane asks, if you see this, are there any plans for an audio immersion tunnel version of ELLC, and when is DCC audio immersion tunnel number 2 coming out? So number 2, seasons 2 and 3 are coming out back to back later this year. We're aiming for late summer, but it may be fall. It's taking us a long time because we're being very, very thorough with the scripts and our beginning plans.
All right. How do you want to do this? I mean, you still need to look after those 3 meatbags, and one is out of town.
Oh, and about the... about ELLC. Lorthane, how much have you listened? Because starting from book 4, we start to gradually incorporate more and more sound effects and music and cast members. And I would say by this point, the series is basically cinematic already. Like, as close to as it gets. So, I'm thinking, we're thinking about republishing Everybody Loves Large Chests Volume 1 and the rest of them on our platform. If we do that, maybe we'll redo Book 1? I don't know. I mean, maybe we can look in the sets and, and make them cinematic that way instead of re-recording the whole thing. But I kind of would like to re-record the whole thing. But yeah, I don't know. What do you guys think about that idea? Going back to books 1 through 3 and redoing them as a cinematic.
Yeah. We'll need to wait until things settle down around here.
Yeah, 4. Did I say something different? 4 is for Morgana. That's when we brought Annie in, and that's when Kira came in. It honestly would have liked to just stick those oh-so-important triplets in its dungeon and leave them there for their own protection, but that was a no-go. Nellie's ultimatum regarding Boxxy. Nellie's ultimatum regarding Boxxy's hero status required that it actually teach them useful life lessons, and that wouldn't happen if they were locked up. As such, even though Boxxy wanted to hold that teamwork session immediately, its divine obligations had to take priority, which in turn demanded that the busybodies in the Republic government got all the way off Kira's back. Boxxy judged... An immersion version. Oh, so because we have the audio immersion tunnel of DCC, even though we have the exclusivity, if we do a fully new cinematic audio version of ELLC, Book 1, we'd be able to publish that on our platform without going non-exclusive with the rest of the series. Is that what you mean? Boxxy judged that would take at least a week, hence why the troublesome triplets boot camps would take just as long. Nice. Yeah, I don't know. We'd consider that. Sure enough, things around Azure Vale had calmed down significantly by the time Teresa's daughters completed their respective crash courses. Unfortunately, they weren't able to get through entirely without incident, evidenced by the misunderstanding between Lydia and Mr. Greymane. The stoic priestess was apparently quite impressed by the man's strong body, sharp wit, noble spirit, and kind heart. She judged him a suitable candidate to father the Nephilim race and practically demanded that he, in her own words, breed her. For better or worse, the wise monk knew better than to stick his dick in crazy and instantly fled, leaving her alone in the wilderness. Madeline had the opposite issue when the drunken bard teaching her to sing spells misconstrued her casually flirty personality as genuine interest. Bill Underbridge says, I don't think going full audio drama would work. ELLC's narration is about 30 to 40% of the story and humor. Yeah, that's one of the problems. But, I mean, you know, I think that what we did with... I think what we're doing now with the audiobook production as it is, I think that's probably the perfect mix. Because we're keeping most of the narration. We're just adding the sound effects and music. Madeline had the opposite issue when the drunken bard teaching her to sing spells misconstrued her casually flirty personality as genuine interest. He got too handsy with her, so Snack lightly toasted the right side of his face. Ironically, Robin was the only one to avoid sexual misconduct, despite Arms constantly egging her to find a guy and break a bet or two with him. Her issue was she accidentally released all of Yoshin's monstrous mounts and caused a small stampede through Azurevale. Those three aside, the Foreign Intelligence Bureau had fully embraced Kira's scapegoat and cover story, whether they genuinely believed it or just decided to go with it for convenience was unclear and unimportant. The authorities would relax the heightened security around the capital, making it easier for Boxxy's crew to move around. Curiously, they had plans to hold off revealing their capture of the culprit behind the Great Collapse to the general public. A bit of poking and prodding from Kira revealed this decision was politically motivated. At first, she was told the government needed more time to make sure the man was guilty of the immense crime before they... At first, she was told the government needed more time to make sure the man was guilty of the immense crime before they publicly condemned and executed him. In reality, voting season was coming up later in the year, and those in power wanted to capitalize on the spike of public opinion this news would bring, effectively guaranteeing their re-election. The hero's public face disagreed with this move, but the shapeshifter underneath was perfectly content with it. The greater the reveal's impact, the more its doppelganger job would benefit. For the moment, however, it focused on its internal information exchange. During a quiet evening, it had Rowana, Doris, and the triplets covertly removed from their hotel rooms and safely deposited in the dungeon's prison block. The women were sedated through magical or alchemical means, leaving them blissfully unaware of their temporary status as living luggage. That out of the way, Boxxy fetched Jen from its branch office in Velos. Summoned all three familiars, tore Fizzy away from her projects, and gathered them under the glowing dungeon core. It briefly explained its concerns regarding their lack of cooperation and then ordered them to participate wholeheartedly in the meeting, even if some thought it stupid or boring. That said, the shapeshifter recognized poring over all of it and its underlings' capabilities would require far too much time, effort, and concentration. Its monstrous troop possessed nearly 300 skills, at least 70 spells, Its monstrous troop possessed nearly 300 skills, at least 70 spells, around 30 martial arts, and a few dozen perks. While it personally had no trouble keeping all those moving parts in mind, not all of its allies shared its mental acuity or propensity for While it personally had no trouble keeping all those moving parts in mind, not all of its allies shared its mental acuity or propensity for inventory lists. Thus, it had spent the past week condensing that mountain of information into concise summaries that were handed to everyone in attendance. The shapeshifter had omitted certain things for brevity's sake, such as mastery skills and artisan jobs. While the latter had some abilities with potential combat applications, such as alchemical fortitude giving it a higher tolerance for ingesting potions, they were primarily passive, low-impact effects. Non-legendary perks were excluded for similar reasons.
Question.
The girls had barely started pouring through the list before a certain someone's hand The girls had barely started pouring through the list before a certain someone's hand shot straight up.
Yes, Jen?
Isn't Fizzy a superbly unfair existence?
The harpy instantly noticed the golem could generate MP with Engine of Destruction and heal herself with Parallel Plot while simultaneously locked in melee combat, not to mention how certain paladin skills worked a little too well with her mechanical constitution.
Yes, she is. You can't overpower her with brute force, and outpacing her self-healing without a squad of casters is impossible. You can't overpower her with brute force, and outpacing her self-healing without a squad of casters is impossible. She can only be defeated if she's instantly obliterated by magic or her chanting is silenced for an extended period of time.
The avian hybrid lowered her hand, her tight-lipped micro-expressions hinting at either jealousy or envy, though she knew the golem to be a powerful foe after fighting against and alongside her. This was the first time she'd been able to grasp just how absurdly synergetic her skills were. I'm sorry, guys. I really got to take this call. One moment, please. I'm back. Sorry about that, guys. I had to take that call that was from my dad's bank. All right, let's see here. Just gotta send them an email. Okay. Got it done. I just caught up with DCC. What would you recommend next? They're in line with DCC. I mean, everybody loves large chests. I always recommend, even though it's fucked up and it's not for everybody. Kaiju Battlefield Surgeon on our platform. That's another Matt Dinneman book. That's a cinematic audio. And as fucked up as ELLC is, Kaiju is even more so. Just in a different way. I would say The Stars Have Eyes as well on our platform. That's another Neven Iliev, but it's more of a romantic comedy, Eldritch Horror. It's really awesome. It's one of my favorite productions we've ever done. I even like Stars Have Eyes better than I like Everybody Loves Large Chests. Or Prophecy Approved Companion, I would say. That's on Audible. That's a 3-part series narrated by Annie Ellicott, and it's a lit RPG, and it's fucking hilarious. I don't really want to spoil it for you, but just check it out and see what it's about. See what it's like. Let me get you a link. I think it's an absolute shame that this series did not do better. There we go. There's the link to it. While her own monstrification had given her a number of potent combinations with her other jobs, they were nowhere near the level of practically immortal.
You sure it's a good idea to give this bird brain so much info, boss? She used to be our enemy, you know.
And now she's not. She needs to understand all of our weaknesses if she is to cover for them, and vice versa.
If you say so, boss.
The hoarder demon clearly had some misgivings. She was still a fiend at heart, and the stubborn, pig-headed attitude that came with that territory would no doubt be an issue. Her way of thinking would likely change now that she was a hoarder, but that process would probably take years, maybe even centuries. She worked well enough with her co-contractors, thanks to the shared mind link, but Cora wasn't nearly the team player Boxxy needed her to be, and it couldn't just order her to become one. Well, it could, but an instruction that open-ended was practically pointless. Thankfully, her newly awakened desires gave the crafty warlock an opportunity to motivate her.
Do your best to cooperate with others, and I'll give you suitably shiny things as compensation.
The demon's eyes lit up. She turned her attention back to the list of skills, eager to earn her keep. The rest of Boxxy's posse was already taking this seriously, so ideas on how to best utilize their combined skill sets started flowing almost immediately. Jen finally realized she could benefit immensely from Fizzy's holy infusion. The spell amplified the effects of the faith, wisdom, and mental... The spell amplified the effects of the faith, wisdom, and mental fortitude attributes, greatly improving her ki-based skills and lessening the impact of mental attacks, one of her vulnerabilities. It might even counteract the debilitating side effects of Boxxy's dark infusion, though she was loath to actually partake in that. Even if the warlock's temporary physical boost would be immense given her attribute scores, being immobilized for even half a second was likely to prove deadly in high-level combat. Meanwhile, Fizzy had already planned a number of combination moves, usually involving Cora or Boxxy. She'd grown used to them hiding in their vault or storage and leaping out for a surprise attack. If the hoarder wore her armor or the shapeshifter was using metal mimicry, she could use her magnetize skill to propel either at high speed towards a target or drag them away as a means of emergency evasion. Zira's fire-based spells and skills, on the other hand, could rapidly raise her body temperature after a heat exchange had cooled her down, jump-starting her MP generator so her alter ego could continue pumping out support spells. Zira's fire-based spells and skills, on the other hand, could rapidly raise her body temperature after a heat exchange had cooled her down, I think ELLC is going to be 13, and that's it. Zira's fire-based spells and skills, on the other hand, could rapidly raise her body temperature after a heat exchange had cooled her down, jump-starting her MP generator so her alter ego could continue pumping out support spells. She could also use Drea's steel thread as an improvised conductor to shock people from afar with her static field, provided the spider silk didn't catch fire. The web stalker in question didn't have much to add. She knew she could rely on the others to help set up her ambushes and was certain they counted on her to gift wrap troublesome targets in her sticky thread. This sort of teamwork did not rely on gimmicky spells or skills, and such things would be of little benefit to her. At least, that's what she thought, until Zira pointed out her illusion could help mask both Drea and her webbing. Combined with spell crystals, glyphcraft, and 2 monstrous artificers' worth of explosive devices, she could create death traps like the... Combined with spell crystals, glyphcraft, and 2 monstrous artificers' worth of explosive devices, she could create death traps like the likes of which... Combined with spell crystals, glyphcraft, and 2 monstrous artificers' worth of explosive devices, she could create death traps the likes of which she never thought possible. That notion appealed immensely to her arachnid sensibilities, and she was suddenly quite excited to start exploring those possibilities. Zira also saw it fit to again remind everyone of her own supportive magics, limited as they were, Amplify magic was her most potent ability, though it could very well be a double-edged sword if used inappropriately, since it increased both outgoing and incoming damage. The fiery weapon spell could add that extra spice to nearly all of their attacks, while the combination of Fire Ward and Backdraft would be immensely useful when defending against a dragon's breath. The fiery weapon spell could add that extra spice to nearly all of their attacks, while the combination of Fire Ward and Backdraft could The fiery weapon spell could add that extra spice to nearly all of their attacks, while the combination of Fire Ward and Backdraft would be immensely useful when defending against a dragon's breath. Granted, Boxxy wasn't planning to fight a dragon, but considering where they were going, it would be idiotic not to prepare for that event. Granted, Boxxy wasn't planning to fight a dragon, but considering where they were going, it would be idiotic not to prepare for the eventuality. Granted, Boxxy wasn't planning to fight a dragon, but considering where they were going, it would be idiotic not to prepare for the eventuality. Jen, who had felt a bit left out thus far, politely informed the Djinn she was mistaken. Apparently, the idea that dragons on the Shattered Isles only breathed fire was a somewhat common misconception brought on by the massive red worm that claimed dominion over Hell. Dragons could wield any of the primordial elements depending on their species, with some even using holy or necromantic energies. The aforementioned fiery weapon might prove far more useful during the festival than the Djinn had been led to believe should they actually encounter any worms susceptible to it. She also shared a few tricks she learned from former colleagues regarding the Djinn's illusory abilities. The aforementioned fiery weapon might prove far more useful during the festival than the Djinn had been led to believe should they actually encounter any worms susceptible to it. She also shared a few tricks she learned from former colleagues regarding the Djinn's illusory abilities, conjure mirage, and invisibility in particular. Her experience with the Gilded Hand made her a veritable treasure trove of information, much as Boxxy hoped it would when it recruited her. Cora, on the other hand, was her usual blockhead self and had trouble thinking of any new tactics. She didn't like any plan more complex than hit things really hard or toss the shiny gnome at people. She was a frontline fighter whose job description was to turn herself into a target impossible to ignore. From there, it was a simple matter of letting Fizzy keep her as near death as possible so her berserker skills could exhibit their full power. She also wouldn't complain if a certain ice spider kept her targets from moving around as she pummeled them into a thick red sauce, but this went without saying. That said, all three demons had a lot to think about thanks to the warlock skill Boxxy had received in the aftermath of Aaron's defeat. Summoner's Grimoire. The unbreakable bond between master and servant allows the warlock to lend a portion of their arcane might to a bound familiar. Requirements: Level 85 Warlock, Malefic Union. Type: Active. Activation time: 3 seconds. Cost: 30% of max MP. Range: 2 meters. Effects: Conjures a semi-autonomous grimoire and binds it to a summoned familiar. The grimoire will follow its bonded familiar and respond to their mental directions. The grimoire cannot recover MP and starts with 60% of the MP used in its creation. The grimoire can use any spell its creator knows of. The grimoire can use any spell its creator knows of at 30% effectiveness. Increases the grimoire's spell effectiveness ratio by 3% per level of this skill. increases the grimoire's MP by an extra 2% of the MP used in its creation per level of this skill. The grimoire persists until its MP is exhausted, it is destroyed, or a new grimoire is created. Even with the hefty MP cost and reduced magic power, these ethereal books would prove immensely powerful. One obvious advantage was that Boxxy's arcane might could be put to use while it was otherwise occupied. Zero would have an entire spellbook's worth of toys to confuse her. Zira would have an entire spellbook's worth of toys to confuse her opponents, though Drea was far less enthusiastic. A semi-sentient book floating around her at all times just didn't sit right, mostly since it would give away her position. The upside was that she found the conjured grimoire's flavor rather agreeable. While Cora's one-track mind only saw it as a source of dark infusion, it was still quite the invigorating incantation, even at a third its normal potency. Still, it would be handy to have one of those fancy books around should she face a ranged combatant able to give her the runaround. Getting outranged was her only real issue. Boxxy disagreed with that assessment. In its opinion, the six-armed demon's biggest problem was her pitifully low mana reserves. Her new Hoarder skills were significantly thirstier for MP than her Fiend or Berserker abilities, drastically limiting how often she could utilize them compared to the abilities she had previously... Her new Hoarder skills were significantly thirstier for MP. Her new Hoarder skills were significantly thirstier for MP than her Fiend or Berserker abilities, drastically limiting how often she could utilize them compared to the abilities she had. Her new Hoarder skills were significantly thirstier for MP than her Fiend or Berserker abilities, drastically limiting how often she could utilize them compared to the abilities she had previously as an Archfiend. Her master already knew how to alleviate this and informed her it would be lending her one of its 52 artifacts for the duration of the Dragon Festival. More specifically, a growing crystal vial on a string meant to be worn as an amulet, aptly called a portable mana battery. It could raise the Hoarder's maximum MP by a staggering 500, nearly doubling her magical reserves. It directly affected the total without going through the intelligence attribute, which was great. It directly affected the total without going through the intelligence attribute, which was great as it circumvented the downside of Cora's idiotic strength skill. The effect would also stack with the standard suite of intelligence-boosting enchantments, allowing for an even greater boost to Arm's magical reserves. Her MP recovery would still be effectively nil, but that wouldn't be an issue so long as she paced herself and didn't immediately blow her load. While on the subject, the shapeshifter made it clear the Hoarder wouldn't be the only one to receive this treatment. Once they departed for the Dragon Festival, it would use its vast armory to gear up its minions and allies with all the artifacts they could benefit from. It had already picked out the optimal loadout for each of them, demons included. Snack would have the Crust Controller's staff to massively amplify her pyromancer skills. A spectral cowl was set aside for Claws to let her phase through solid matter, though doing so would slowly drain her HP. The Divine Decree was a ring oversaturated with holy energy that would be of... The Divine Decree was a ring oversaturated with holy energy that would be of... The Divine Decree was a ring oversaturated with holy energy that would be of huge help to both Jen and Fizzy. It even had a staff called Branching Path that Ambrosia's Spriggan vessel would find most useful. A heavy silence hung in the air at the mention of the slumbering dryad. Okay, let's see here. Okay, I'm going to assume that they're in Boxxy's lair for this. I was losing some energy there for a little bit. I don't know how many of you guys here have been at some of my cold reads before, but it's not unheard of for me to like start nodding off while narrating. Isn't that wild? Like, it's so second nature to me that I can literally fall asleep while doing it.
How do you plan to deal with the treacherous shrub, Master?
Zira spoke first.
Calling her treacherous is a bit harsh, don't you think?
No, it really isn't. She led you on for years, intent on turning you into her drug slave. She will no doubt try again once she wakes up, and I'm not going to let her. Indeed. Indeed.
The djinn nodded.
If it were up to me, I would see this entire tree turned to ash and cinders. However, it is not. So, tell me, O wise master of mine, how will you deal with the whorish vegetable when the time comes?
I don't know. I want to say on her goods. I want to stay on her good side, if possible. But I have no idea how she will react if I decline her invitation to drink her nectar.
Question. Jen raised her hand once again. You don't need to keep...
You don't need to keep asking permission. Asking is free.
All right. The harpy nodded. From what I gather, the Dryad owns this tree and is responsible for your honeydew addiction, correct?
That's one way of putting it.
More like the only way.
Was it her intention to cause this affliction?
Don't be stupid, of course it was. Don't be stupid, of course it was.
Zira rolled her eyes.
She practically demanded my master regularly drink directly from the source. How could it not be?
She might not know her nectar is habit-forming and only offered it out of instinct. The monk suggested. Jen was not actually aware of how ancient the Dryad in question was. She was equally ignorant that the substance's addictive properties were revealed. She was equally ignorant that the substance's addictive properties were revealed by one of Ambrosia's peers. She was, however, intimately familiar with how insistent a monster's instincts were. The harpy had been steadily coming to terms with her new and strange urges, so it was... The harpy had been steadily coming to terms with her new and strange urges, so it wasn't hard to imagine something similar was happening to Ambrosia.
That is a very good question, actually.
Jen's perspective, though partially born from ignorance, had given Boxxy something to think about. It had assumed the Dryad had gotten it hooked on nectar out of malice because it didn't trust her. It didn't trust anyone aside from Fizzy. However, it now realized that it should not instantly assume malice. The whole thing started while the Dryad was under the dungeon core's influence, which should have tricked her into putting Boxxy's well-being first and foremost. Much like a contracted familiar, Ambrosia wouldn't have willfully tried to poison the shapeshifter. Much like a contracted familiar, Ambrosia wouldn't have willfully tried to poison the shapeshifter at the time. If one used Lavender's utter devotion to her dungeon's owner as an example... Much like a contracted familiar, Ambrosia wouldn't have willfully tried to... Much like a contracted familiar, Ambrosia wouldn't have willfully tried to poison the shapeshifter at the time. If one used Lavender's utter devotion to her dungeon's owner as an example, something nefarious as drug slave wouldn't have even crossed the Dryad's mind back then.
You can't be serious! You're actually buying this birdbag's delusions?
The harpy took offense to the golem's words and tone, though Boxxy stepped in to de-escalate before things got out of hand.
I'm not saying she's right. I just think it would be idiotic to ignore that possibility. Stranger things have happened.
You know it's unfair when you use that excuse, right? You know it's unfair when you use that excuse, right?
You should know I don't play fair. In all seriousness. You should know I don't play fair. In all seriousness, I wish to at least speak with her before making a call. I'll prepare everything beforehand, just in case we need to leave this place for good.
All right. But if you immediately latch onto her nipple, I'm zapping you unconscious and dragging you out by force. Got that?
Loud and clear. Nope.
Loud and clear. Loud and clear.
Jen's hand shot at... Excuse me. Jen's hand shot up, despite Boxxy assuring her that gesture wasn't necessary, though the shapeshifter was fairly certain what was on her mind.
Dryad nectar comes out of their nipples. The only way to drink it is straight from the source, as it were.
Okay? Jen tilted her head in confusion. That's not what I wanted to ask about, though.
It wasn't?
I just wanted to know when this Ambrosia person is supposed to wake up. Boxxy sighed deeply as it hid its featureless face in its palms.
Don't have an exact date, but in a month or so.
Understood. The creature had been accompanied by one pervert or another for the majority of its life, and had apparently come to expect vulgar questions and remarks at every turn. The creature had been accompanied by one pervert or another for the majority of its life, and had apparently come to expect vulgar questions and remarks at every turn. It was a humbling, depressing realization that did little to help its volatile state of mind. On the bright side, it yet again confirmed Jen was no hornball. Though unexpected, her presence was something of a grounding factor that reminded Boxxy the company it kept was a collection of extremes and exceptions. Whether the monk realized it or not, her peculiar sensibilities and simplistic personality made her the most normal and well-adjusted member of the group. Relatively speaking, of course. All right. That was a almost 40-minute chapter. A big one. Oh, it's already 2:04. Jeez, man. Okay, this is gonna be really weird.
Part 3. Deep within the hollow space of Ambrosia's tree lay a certain chamber. Its walls had been fortified against all known forms of intrusion, be they physical, mystical, or spiritual. Very few beings knew this space existed, and even fewer were granted entry. The room was completely still. Not even random gusts of air were permitted to roam around, lest they spread dust over the priceless treasures within. Yet, despite all attempts to stop it, such filth inevitably accumulated within the well-lit chambers. Though its walls were of smooth, hardened ironbark, not even the powers that preserved it could stop the living, breathing wood from shedding imperceptibly tiny particles everywhere. Thus, a certain flower girl had the crucial task of making sure the room's contents were spotless. It was a dull, menial, repetitive task that Lavender performed with great care and joy. Agreed. Bill Underbridge says, I do like how Neven can bounce between technical precision and unhinged nonsense without missing a beat. Yeah. It was a dull, menial, repetitive task that Lavender performed with great care and joy. Today was no different. She painstakingly polished the hundreds of articles that lined the chamber's walls and mannequins. Whether it was plate or leather, bladed or blunt, magical or mundane, the sheer volume and variety of arms and armor was enough to make any aspiring adventurer's head spin. It was a collection worthy of selling one's soul, though the hoard's owner cared not for such unshiny tribute. Lavender was practically deaf and blind to the extravagance as she carefully and slowly polished one of the dozens of metal shields hanging from a nearby rack. The disc-shaped item rested on top of a workbench, 3 layers of soft cloth between it and the hard, flat surface. Next to it was a bottle of Boxxy's handmade metal polish, which the Alrane applied in meticulous, circular motions. She wore a sweet smile, hummed an idle tune, and gently swayed her hips, yet there were no stray thoughts in her head. She was utterly absorbed in her work, as if bringing the shield to a flawless, mirror-like shine was her life's purpose.
All right. So we have Jack and Virgil here. I'll be Jack. Do we have Ryan? Yeah, we have Ryan. Let's give Virgil to Ryan.
Oi! How come you never polish me that hard? Oi! How come you never polish me that hard?
She didn't even hear the brutish, disembodied voice yelling at her from the side. Let's give Ryan a cooler. A color for Ryan. Let's give him a different shade of orange. Leave the fair flower maiden alone, Jack. Another, far more dignified tone echoed across the silent chamber.
Alone. I haven't even done anything. Not yet, anyway.
Okay. I'm not exactly sure what is what. Accursed abomination! It boggles the mind why the Lord would keep you around.
Oh? Feeling a smidgen jealous, Virgil?
Do not be absurd. To even imply one such as I could ever be jealous of a charlatan like yourself is blasphemy! Heresy, even!
Is that the best you got, Virgil? I've seen butter knives with more edge than ye. Is that the best you got, Virgil? I've seen butter knives with more edge. Is that the best you've got? Is that the best you got, Virgil? I've seen butter knives with more edge than you.
At least a butter knife can fulfill its purpose, unlike a forgotten piece of tin rusting away in a dark corner.
Now, there's no need to project your insecurities.
The only thing I'm going to project is your vile self. The only thing I'm going to project is your vile self, straight into the fires of hell.
That so? Then come over here and do it, you rusty piece of scrap.
I'll have you know the fair flower maiden is very attentive and gentle when she tends to me. Virgil sneered.
Tell me,
When's the last time you had a thorough shine, Jackie boy?
Oh, it's on, old man.
Bring it! Everybody Loves Large Chests is about a psychotic murdering box. A mimic. It's a lit RPG, so go pick it up now, Colton. Be warned, this is a really, really fucked up series. If you are sensitive at all, I do not recommend this series. Lavender finished her task and okay, so sorry guys, I had to turn down my my gain. I didn't realize it had been turned up, and I've been recording like that. Lavender finished her task and finally loosened her focus enough to notice the ongoing conversation. Her serene demeanor was overturned by worry and unease. She wasn't used to dealing with those two, and all this shouting was difficult to tune out. Stopping the quarrel by herself would be no easy feat either, at least not with the limitations of her current orders. She really didn't want to bother her owner, but she had little other choice and requested aid through the Dungeon Corps' private communications channel.
I'm super sorry to bother you, Boxxy, but Jack and Virgil are at it again.
What? Didn't I tell you to separate them?
I did. They're on opposite sides of the armory, but they still keep shouting at each other.
No, you pollen-brained moron. I meant put them in different rooms.
Oh, that makes so much more sense.
I'm sending Snack over to transfer Jack to storage room 4. Go calm down Virgil in the meantime.
Happy for that sagely advice, Lavender carefully placed the freshly polished shield back in its place and sauntered over to Virgil's location. A few weeks ago, she would have just teleported herself along with her massive purple flower. However, she now had a laborer job to level up. Footwork was an integral part of that process, so she had to use her legs as much as possible. She wasn't too thrilled about this. Walking was slow, inefficient, and her daily polishing quota was significant. On the upside, lying down in her purple flower after a hard day's work felt absolutely divine. She looked forward to that sweet release as she expertly navigated the weapon racks, armor stands, and display cases that filled the room until she reached a certain article. Propped up in a place of pride was a mithril sword with a glass eye in its hilt, its dimly glowing iris turning to focus on Lavender's lovely face. Dude, why couldn't you just... Never mind. Oh. Oh, greetings, my dear flower maiden. The weapon spoke. Did my attempts to silence that ruffian pull you away from your duties?
Yeah, they kinda did.
She nodded. My deepest apologies. I tried my best to remain silent and not escalate things, but it is...
And your Smith was a whore!
Jack's voice rang out in the background. Difficult, Virgil added.
Boxxy will take care of him, so, please stop raising a fuss.
Oh, I see. Oh, I see. Lord Morningwood has finally decided to rid the world of that accursed maniac. Most excellent. Okay, so... do you guys remember Lavender from the last book? Because I've been doing her voice with a French accent just because that's what I thought would be funny for an Alrane. And I thought that the first Alrane we did, with also Alejandra, we did a French accent. But he's saying that we were supposed to do a Valley Girl thing for her. So, do you guys remember that? looking for... Greed is good. Okay. Okay. So she did do a French accent with this one. No. Hold on, Tristan, what are you hearing? Cuz I'm listening to it and she's got this she's got a French accent going on. Oops. Yeah, definitely French. Okay. Glad to help, Coogie Buns. All right, so let me check what Neven was saying to me earlier. Yep, it's fine. Okay, keeping her French is fine. All right, now let's give Ryan some direction here. Okay. Nope, why? Why? Oh, damn it. Get rid of that, get rid of the... Okay, I already turned that off. Virgil and Jack had a long-standing, still ongoing rivalry. Both were sentient weapons, though the similarities ended there. Both were sentient weapons, though the similarities ended there. One was a noble-spirited and beautiful longsword, the other a cursed and wicked knife. The flows of... The flows of chaos had conspired to make the pair cross paths on countless occasions over the past several decades, and they had crossed blades more than once. However, this was the first time the pair shared an owner. Neither were used to being within earshot of the other for this long, and by the sound of it, that only amplified their mutual hatred. After all, it was immensely difficult to work out one's aggression without means of locomotion, so their bickering achieved little beyond frustrating both even further. In reality, nothing would change, even if the pair could clash of their own volition. Though classified as sentient items, they were ultimately lifeless objects. They had opinions, preferences, and memories, but these were the products of a personality matrix enchantment. Neither artifact grade carried a soul, which freed them from both the burden of free will and the responsibility of making decisions. The one holding the handle was always in control, and the only influence the manufactured personalities could exert was through their words and advice. Even when they spoke, it was not truly of their own volition, but in accordance with whatever purpose their creators imbued within them. Even when they spoke, it was not truly of their own volition, but in accordance with whatever purpose their creators imbued within them. The entity called Virgil inhabited vigilance, a mithril blade that could assist its wielder in parrying attacks and possessed omnidirectional perception on par with the beholder's mana locator gland. The entity called Virgil inhabited vigilance, a mithril blade that could assist its wielder in parrying attacks and possessed omnidirectional perception on par with the beholder's mana locator gland. It was uniquely suited to maintain and uphold the virtue for which it was named, a sword to reveal trickery and defend the weak. Naturally, the artificial personality that sprang from it was one of honor and discipline. Conversely, Jack was an insidious, selfish piece of shit that dwelled within a serrated dagger called the Ripper. It siphoned the blood of its victims to nourish and empower its user, potentially turning them into an unstoppable killing machine despite the blade's short reach. However, as with all cursed equipment, the Ripper's dark gifts came with a hefty price. The dagger's power was intoxicating, and its sinister personality brought out the worst in people. It was impossible to tell whether the weapon was intentionally made this way or if its original personality was twisted by the dark magics it shared a container with. Regardless of its origins, the addictive enchantment and deranged voice worked in tandem to steadily warp the weapon's wielder into a deranged killer. This was the fate of the Ripper's previous owner, a happy-go-lucky explorer who only took up adventuring for the thrill of it. Jack's insidious influence turned him into a meticulous, methodical serial killer who stalked the streets of Azurvale, preying on the weak and helpless. He gained notoriety as the Butcher of Elm Avenue, and his reign of terror lasted for over half a year. It came to an abrupt end when the killer set his sights on a certain platinum-blonde apothecary with a bad habit of cutting through dark alleys, only to find himself squaring off against Azurvale's favorite redhead. Boxxy recognized the Ripper's potential the instant the blade fell into its possession. The weapon was undoubtedly lethal, but the shapeshifter had a better use for it than wanton butchery. The weapon was undoubtedly lethal, but the shapeshifter had a better use for it than wanton butchery. The weapon was undoubtedly lethal, but the shapeshifter had a better use for it than wanton butchery. If, hypothetically, the monster wanted to eliminate a public figure, there were few ways as deliciously devilish as inflicting Jack's madness upon them. Once the psychotic urges had taken root, the target would develop some hobbies that would inevitably make them run afoul of either the law or a suspiciously well-informed vigilante. Granted, pulling this off would be a lot more complicated than simply killing the target, but in such cases it wasn't the individual that was a threat to Boxxy's plans. Simply murdering a political rival might turn them into a martyr, but if they were ousted as a bloodthirsty maniac, the public's perception of the target's ideals and ideas would be forever tainted with the blood of the innocent. But if they were ousted as a bloodthirsty maniac, the public's perception of the target's ideals and ideas would be forever tainted with the blood of the innocent. It wouldn't even matter much if Jack's involvement was revealed, since the emotional response would overpower such details. While the Ripper certainly held great potential as a tool for character assassination, all of that was entirely hypothetical. Boxxy didn't actually have any enemies to test this scheme on, and neither did its public persona. Still, it liked to be prepared just in case they popped up in the future. Thus, Zira unceremoniously moved the confrontational weapon to one of the lower priority storage rooms where it could make all the noise it wanted. After all, if a psychotic knife started yelling about wanting to stab things, but nobody was around to hear it, would Boxxy give a crap? Absolutely not. Virgil, on the other hand, would prove very useful in the near future. It was one of the many articles acquired from the Phantom auction, and according to the provided information, it had been through multiple dragon festivals. The sentient sword had become something of an expert on the Shattered Isles, or so the shapeshifter hoped, though some of the weapon's claims cast doubt on the reliability of its memory. Either Virgil was a bit rusty, or there truly was such a thing as a backwards dragon that flew butt first and upside down. Boxxy knew better than to outright dismiss anything as impossible, but it still took the weapon's words with a pinch of salt. Still, even if the sentience proved senile, the blade it inhabited was quite formidable.
Vigilance. A mithril longsword given sentience by its creator, Bon Stonebreaker. Bonnie? Bon Stonebreaker. An excellent weapon and veteran of hundreds of battles, Vigilance serves as ally, mentor, and protector to whoever it recognizes as its rightful owner. It does not appreciate being stolen and will rebel against anyone who tries to take it without its current wielder's express permission, but has no problem being sold, gifted, or claimed through honorable combat. The sword also innately perceives absolutely everything within 12 meters and relays this information to its wielder, though this feature requires a constant stream of MP. Type, sword. Quality, artifact. Offensive ability, A+. Defensive ability, B. Durability, B+. Magic amplification, none. Enchantments, self-repair, increased sharpness, personality matrix, bound by blood, swing assist, parry assist, innate ability. The A+ attack rating was the highlight of the appraisal result, as it was the bare minimum required to do damage. The A+ attack rating was the highlight of the appraisal result, as it was the bare minimum required to damage a dragon's scales. Well, perhaps not an elder's, but Boxxy wouldn't dare challenge one of those, no matter how tasty the opportunity seemed. The swing assist and parry assist were features that only sentient weapons could possess, allowing Virgil to bolster his wielder's offensive and defensive swordplay. The mithril blade could also be used in conjunction with all of the shapeshifter's blade dancer techniques, though that was suboptimal since Vigilance wasn't a thrusting weapon meant to target gaps and weak spots. The same could be said of the 17 other artifact weapons in Boxxy's possession. Plenty were swords, sure, but all of those favored brawn over finesse. A notable example was the Jack blade, not to be confused with the slash-happy knife called Jack. It was a weirdly shaped one-handed weapon that simultaneously counted as an axe, sword, and dagger as far as skills and martial arts were concerned. Having multiple avenues of boosting the weapon's power was certainly promising, but it remained far too heavy to be of any use to a blade dancer. The only suitable artifacts in Boxxy's possession were a set of twinned daggers called Daybreak and Nightfall. While they could bring out the deadly dance's full potency, their short reach was an issue. Boxxy was rather infuriated at its lack of specialized high-grade equipment for its close-range job. It wasn't as if Kira's now iconic masterwork rapier was bad, it just wasn't an artifact with a unique innate ability. All things considered, the monster's grievances were akin to a wealthy merchant complaining that his quarterly profits were only 300,000 GP. Yet the shapeshifter ranted and bitched about the issue for hours on end, especially recently. It did not take much to set Boxxy off lately. A month had passed since it was forced to quit Honeydew, and its withdrawal symptoms were worse than ever. It also had to deal with Cora's demonic taint. That was by far the more dangerous condition, but it resisted all attempts to cleanse it. Fizzy's holy magic seemed to have no effect on it, and the academic community didn't possess enough information on the phenomenon to devise a cure. The general consensus was one simply had to resist the corruption's influence until it dispersed. One simply had to resist the corruption's influence until it dispersed naturally over time, but that clearly wasn't working with the honeydew withdrawal adding fuel to the flames. Boxxy had But that clearly wasn't working with the honeydew withdrawal. Adding fuel to the flames. Boxxy didn't exactly have the luxury of waiting things out either. The Dragon Festival crept ever closer, as did Ambrosia's awakening. Things would get rather complicated if its attempts to find a quick cure for either affliction continued to meet with failure.
For the moment, the shapeshifter had little choice but to grit its teeth and hope that one of its contacts would come back with good results. It sought to distract itself by focusing on its artificer and alchemist jobs. This proved difficult since one of the withdrawal symptoms was bouts of uncontrollable shaking, especially pronounced in its extremities. Precision was a deciding factor in all artisan jobs, so Boxxy's trembling naturally diminished the quality of its gadgets and mixtures. Trying to control those tiny, sporadic movements required an immense amount of focus and an unhealthy dose of persistence. Luckily, the shapeshifter had those in spades, especially when it came to an artificer's craft. It also helped that the monster had a natural affinity for tinkering, which it was as an extension of it. It also helped that the monster had a natural affinity for tinkering, which it saw as an extension of its shapeshifting talent. After all, was growing a bushel of eyeballs on one's skin all that different from assembling a drill-tipped pole weapon? Not as far as Boxxy T. Morningwood was concerned. This mindset, combined with the sheer amount of time and effort the monster put into its work in the past few weeks, would inevitably lead it to... This mindset, combined with the sheer amount of time and effort the monster put into its work in the past few weeks, would inevitably lead it... This mindset, combined with the sheer amount of time and effort the monster put into its work in the past few weeks, would inevitably lead it to creating great things. You have created a thermo-accelerated drill lance of masterwork quality. Boxxy barely acknowledged the message as it grasped the finished weapon and applied its only active artificer skill.
Upgrade!
Hey, Edward Jenner, good to see you too. All right, guys, I got about 5 minutes left. So I'm not going to be able to finish this part. Pretty sure Jessie Wick is Annie. The drill-tipped mechanical spear shook violently for a few seconds as its internal mechanism was ever so slightly tweaked, though not necessarily for the better. Your upgrade was a major failure. Thermo-accelerated drill lance offensive capability decreased from A to B+. Thermo-accelerated drill lance is now superior quality. The creature took a deep breath, then hurled its latest creation against the workshop's wall with all its might. The creature took a deep breath, then hurled its latest creation against the workshop's wall with all its might. It hit the steel-plated surface hard, producing a loud gong, followed by it clattering across the floor, its internal motors now misaligned beyond repair. At least the mechanized spear wouldn't be lonely, given the other 10 similarly failed projects strewn about.
Upgrade didn't work out, huh?
Fizzy asked from behind.
No. No, it did not.
Careful there. Careful there. Your mask is slipping.
Right. Right.
The doppelganger momentarily forgot it was supposed to be maintaining its public persona. Kira had fed Roanna some sappy made-up story about how she felt guilty for not helping prevent her father's death, and that she may have indirectly caused the collapse. The cat girl claimed she needed to go someplace quiet where she could keep her hands and mind occupied while she came to terms with these feelings. However, their house and the workshop within were... still being rebuilt. This gave Boxxy a plausible excuse to spend most of its time at Fizzy's place, resulting in the small pile of failed experiments in the corner of her basement. Unfortunately, while the aforementioned coping mechanism was helping it deal with its withdrawal, it wasn't perfect. Its previous outburst was evidence enough, as it had acted and spoken in a very un-Kira-like manner, despite wearing her form. Thankfully, Fizzy was there to remind it that, though her subterranean workshop was as private as a room could get, the shapeshifter was still technically in public. It didn't want to take any unnecessary risks, so it took a minute to calm down and fix the crack in its facade. Okay, so this should be Kira. Okay. All right, that is all I have time for today, guys. Thank you so much for coming and hanging out. Got quite a bit done, even though it was just 1.5 parts of the book. But I am back at it tomorrow at the same time. Watch out for notifications. Watch out for the stream to start. And yeah, I hope you had fun today. Y'all have a good rest of your night. And yeah, I'll see you later. Be sure to check out our new app, Sound Booth. on iOS or Android. Our new app. Oh, and we just corrected. There's a battery drain issue when we first released, so that has been dealt with. So please test that out and let us know if it didn't work, if it didn't fix on your system. All right, guys, have a good one. Bye bye. Tomorrow.